rituals that I felt I had to go through to protect myself. Again, it's embarrassing. I was a youngster. I must have been a terrible accuser to her, a terrible accusal of what a rotten mother she was.
And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on.
And I went to a strip cell 2 cells down, where all I had was a mattress over a hole in the floor.
Oh, gee, you don't mind me. You know, she kind of got hung up on my looks or whatever. You know, I mean, she's a gorgeous young lady.
I picked them up. We drove into town about 2 miles, 3 miles. I dropped them off. I got some gas and kept right on going.
And I panicked. I thought I just locked the car keys in because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk.
Edmund Emil Kemper III, born on December 18, 1948, is an American serial slayer who slayed 8 people, including a 15-year-old girl, his own mother, and her best friend, from May 1972 to April 1973. Years earlier, at the age of 15, Kemper had slayed his paternal grandparents. Kemper was nicknamed the Co-Ed Slayer, as most of his non-familial victims were female college students hitchhiking in the vicinity of Santa Cruz County, California. Most of his slayings included necrophilia, decapitation, and dismemberment. Found sane and guilty at his trial in 1973, Kemper requested the demise penalty for his crimes. Capital punishment was suspended in California at the time, and he instead received 8 concurrent life sentences. Since then, he has been incarcerated in the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Early life. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born in Burbank, California on December 18, 1948. He was the middle child of 3 children, and only son born to Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper, née Stage, and Edmund Emil Kemper Jr. Edmund Jr. was a World War II veteran who, after the war, tested nuclear weapons at the Pacific Proving Grounds before returning to California, where he worked as an electrician. Clarnell often complained about her husband's menial electrician job. Edmund Jr. later stated that missions in wartime and the atomic explosion testings were nothing compared to living with Clarnell, and that she affected him more than 369 days and nights of fighting on the front did. Weighing 13 pounds, 5.9 kilograms as a newborn,
how would you select your victims?
I didn't select them. It was random.
Also, when you feel you need to redo an answer, you can do it. You know, it's no
I
problem.
don't have any problem with it.
I'd never been on a date. At 16, that was cool, you know. I'd never been on a date, you know. I was locked up since I was 15.
My father chopping the heads off of our 2 pet chickens and my mother insisting that I eat them for dinner.
Kemper was a head taller than his peers by the age of 4. Early on, he exhibited antisocial behavior such as cruelty to animals. At the age of 10, he buried a pet cat alive, then dug it up, decapitated it, and mounted its head on a spike. Kemper later stated that he derived pleasure from successfully lying to his family about slaying the cat. At the age of 13, he slayed another family cat when he perceived it to be favoring his younger sister, Allen Lee Kemper, born in 1951, over him. He kept pieces of it in his closet until his mother found them. Kemper was known to harbor dark fantasies and have a morbid imagination. In his youth, Kemper performed rites with his younger sister's dolls that culminated in his removing their heads and hands. On one occasion, when his elder sister, Susan Huey Kemper, teased him and asked why he did not try to kiss his teacher, he replied, "If I kiss her, I'd have to slay her first." Kemper recalled that as a young boy, he would sneak out of his house and, armed with his father's bayonet, go to his second-grade teacher's house to watch her through the windows. Kemper also stated in interviews in his later life that some of his favorite games to play as a child were gas chamber and electric chair, in which he asked his younger sister to tie him up and flip an imaginary switch. He would then tumble over and writhe on the floor, pretending that he was being executed by gas inhalation or electric shock.
I picked them up. We drove into town about 2 miles, 3 miles. I dropped them off. I got some gas and kept right on going. Other than the experts all jumping up to give their opinions, which you've been doing for a lot of years, and unfortunately they don't hit too well.
I'm saying I've wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. It started with surrogates at a non-human level.
Alcohol increase. I watched her social life drop off. I watched her get bizarre.
Kemper also had near-demise experiences as a child. Once, his elder sister tried to push him in front of a train. Another time, she pushed him into the deep end of a swimming pool where Kemper almost drowned. Kemper had a close relationship with his father and was notably devastated when his parents separated in 1957 and divorced in 1961. He was sent to live with his mother, Clarnell, in Helena, Montana. Kemper had a severely dysfunctional relationship with his mother, a neurotic, domineering alcoholic who frequently belittled, humiliated, and attacked him. Clarnell often made her son sleep in a locked basement because she feared that he would harm his sisters, regularly mocked him for his large size. He stood 6 feet 4 inches by the age of 15, and derided him as a real weirdo in a phone conversation to Kemper's father, unaware that her son had been eavesdropping. She also refused to show Kemper affection out of fear that she would turn him gay, and told the young Kemper that he reminded her of his father and that no woman would ever love him.
Hit on into town, have a good time, and sneak back. It was obvious because they were grabbing the first ride they could get.
If I were to have been executed in a timely fashion, they would have had absolutely no input.
I would have killed until they gunned me down. I wouldn't have been able to reason my way out of it. I was scared to death, and I was violent.
And I panicked. I thought, I just locked the car keys in it because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk.
Kemper later described her as a sick, angry woman, and it has been postulated that she had borderline personality disorder. At the age of 14, Kemper ran away from home in an attempt to reconcile with his father in Van Nuys, California. Once there, Kemper learned that his father had remarried and now had a stepson. Kemper stayed with his father for a short while until the elder Kemper sent him to live with his paternal grandparents, who lived on a ranch in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada on Road 224, about 2 miles west of the town of North Fork. Kemper hated living in North Fork. He described his grandfather as senile and said that his grandmother was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. First slayings. On August 27, 1964, at the age of 15, Kemper was sitting at the kitchen table with his grandmother Maud Matilda Huey Kemper when they had an argument. Enraged, Kemper stormed off and retrieved a rifle that his grandfather had given him for hunting. He then re-entered the kitchen and fatally shot his grandmother in the head.
An expert at hitchhiking. She had half her life in Europe. She'd hitchhiked around Europe.
It was very messy and very exciting, and everybody was dragging me off to the hospital, get sewed up and all of that.
She's very much the reason I surrendered. I picked up 2 girls who were so much like the first 2, it was unbelievable.
I kept on just mindlessly attacking. She falls back into the trunk.
Before firing twice more into her back. His grandmother's last words reportedly were, "Oh, you'd better not be shooting the birds again." Some accounts mention that she also suffered multiple post-mortem knife wounds with a kitchen knife. When Kemper's grandfather, Edmund Kemper Sr., born in 1892, returned from grocery shopping, Kemper went outside and fatally shot him in the driveway next to his car. He was unsure of what to do next, so he phoned his mother, who told him to contact the local police. Kemper did so and waited to be taken into custody. After his arrest, Kemper said that he just wanted to see what it felt like to slay Grandma, and testified that he slayed his grandfather so he would not have to find out that his wife was lifeless, because he would be angry with Kemper for what he'd done. Psychiatrist Donald Lundy.
I was not in a proper state of mind to do something like that. It blew me away. I couldn't believe it. It was like it was handed to me on a platter.
Could you tell us how long you've been imprisoned?
Excuse me.
And I didn't blame her even then. I'm saying it was a terrible tragedy, but boy, she didn't ever talk to me again. It was awful.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Who interviewed Kemper during adulthood, wrote, "In his way, he had avenged the rejection of both his father and his mother. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County that houses mentally ill convicts." Imprisonment. At Atascadero, California Youth Authority psychiatrists and social workers disagreed with the court psychiatrist's diagnoses. Their reports stated that Kemper showed no flight of ideas, no interference with thought, no expression of delusions or hallucinations, and no evidence of bizarre thinking. They also observed him to be intelligent and introspective. Initial testing measured his IQ at 136, over 2 standard deviations above average. Kemper was re-diagnosed with a less severe condition.
So she attacked it because I became a cancer in her life. I reminded her every day what a rotten mother she must be. And I'm not saying she was.
And I made a quippy comment. I don't think the police translated it properly for the media because they missed it. They'd loved
Much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry.
To make things fit together inside, I was doing sexual probings and things. I mean, in the sense of striking out and reaching out and...
A personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. Later on, in his time at Atascadero, he was given another IQ test, which gave a higher result of 145. Kemper endeared himself to his psychiatrists by being a model prisoner, and he was trained to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates. A psychiatrist later said, "He was a very good worker, and this is not typical of a sociopath. He really took pride in his work." Kemper also became a member of the JCs while in Atascadero and claimed to have developed some new tests and some new scales on the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, specifically an overt hostility scale, during his work at Atascadero psychiatrists. After his second arrest, Kemper said that being able to understand how these tests functioned allowed him to manipulate his psychiatrists, admitting that he learned a lot from the offenders to whom he administered tests. Release and time between slayings. On December 18, 1969, his 21st birthday, Kemper was released on parole from Atascadero. Against the recommendations of psychiatrists at the hospital, he was released into the care of his mother, Clarnell, who had previously remarried and taken the surname Strandberg but later divorced again. Clarnell resided in Aptos, California, a short drive from where she worked as an administrative assistant at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Kemper later demonstrated further to his psychiatrists that he was rehabilitated, and on November 29, 1972, his juvenile records were permanently expunged. The last report from his probation psychiatrists read, "If I were to see this patient without having any history available,
I was attacking her station. I was attacking her stance in that university setting.
I did an interview with her before I went to prison. It was the day I was sentenced and I was waiting for the car to prison here.
Suddenly there weren't any more, and my back hit that wall and I came out screaming and kicking and shooting.
I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her.
or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illnesses. It is my opinion that he made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be any danger to himself or to any member of society. And since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records. While staying with his mother, Kemper attended community college in accordance with his parole requirements and had hoped to become a police officer, though he was rejected because of his size. At the time of his release from Atascadero, Kemper stood 6 feet 9 inches, which led to his nickname Big Ed. Kemper maintained relationships with Santa Cruz police officers despite his rejection from joining the force, and became a self-described friendly nuisance at a bar called the Jury Room, a popular hangout for local cops. Kemper worked a series of menial jobs before gaining employment with the State of California Division of Highways. During this time, his relationship with Clarnell remained toxic and hostile, with frequent arguments that their neighbors often overheard. Kemper later described the arguments he had with his mother around this time.
At first I was hoping I could get a vicarious thrill out of seeing those pictures and say, well, this will be satisfying enough.
Didn't go into it pre-planned or anything, but I couldn't believe that was a unique act.
I was losing a grasp on something that was too violent to keep inside forever.
And outside, I looked troubled at times. Other times, I looked moody.
When he had saved enough money, Kemper moved out to live with a friend in Alameda. There, he still complained of being unable to get away from his mother because she regularly phoned him and paid him surprise visits. He often had financial difficulties, which resulted in his frequently returning to his mother's apartment in Aptos. Kemper, who was then in his early 20s, met a student from Turlock High School in a Santa Cruz beach, and the two became engaged in March 1973. Their engagement lasted over a year before being broken off due to Kemper's second arrest. Her parents requested her name not be revealed to the public. She was reportedly 17 and still attending high school at the time. The same year that he began working for the Highway Division, Kemper was hit by a car while riding a motorcycle that he had recently purchased. His arm was badly injured in the crash, and he received a $15,000 settlement in the civil suit he filed against the car's driver.
Again, so about the selection and the preparation. If I was selecting and preparing and everything was all set.
It's a difficult question to answer from my point of view because I'm obviously an involved subject.
Or looking at it, and I'm about to go crazy, literally. I'm about to go completely...
Represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her.
As he was driving around in the 1969 Ford Galaxy he bought with part of his settlement money, he noticed a large number of young women hitchhiking and began storing plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs in his car. He first picked up young women hitchhiking, then peacefully let them go. According to Kemper, he picked up around 150 hitchhikers who were in line with this pattern. This was before he felt homicidal physical urges, which he called his little zapples, and later began acting on said urges. At times, he blamed the women he slayed for hitchhiking, which he said was flaunting in my face the fact that they could do any damn thing they wanted and that society is as screwed up as it is. Later slayings. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper slayed 8 people, all women. He would pick up female students who were hitchhiking and take them to isolated areas where he would shoot, knife, smother, or strangle them. He would then take their bodies back to his home, where he decapitated them, performed irumatio on their severed heads, had physical intercourse with their corpse, and then dismembered them. During this 11-month slaying spree, Kemper slayed 5 college students, 1 high school student, his mother, and his mother's best friend. Kemper has stated in interviews that he often searched for victims after having arguments with his mother.
Hard day at work, I'm feeling like I used to feel, I've done some work that day, I've accomplished something. And I'm saying, I can't believe I did.
Good serial killer, obviously.
Yeah, but obviously very few of them could if there was only 35 serial killers.
And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them.
She didn't give up. I did.
And she refused to introduce him to women attending the university where she worked. He recalled, she would say, "You're just like your father. You don't deserve to get to know them." Psychiatrists and Kemper himself have espoused the belief that the young women were surrogates for his ultimate target, his mother. Marianne Pesky and Anita Lucchesa. On May 7, 1972, Kemper was driving in Berkeley when he picked up 2 18-year-old hitchhiking students from Fresno State University, Marianne Pesky and Anita Mary Lucchesa, with the pretense of taking them to Stanford University. After driving for an hour, he managed to reach a secluded wooded area near Alameda, with which he was familiar from his work at the Highway Department, without alerting his passengers.
He was raped as a kid in prison, in youth authority. And then he starts raping other people, and he's a leader of that stuff.
Pull the lever on any serial killer, right? And I'm thinking, gee, he just killed me.
When someone abandons himself to being a victim, he's going to have to be one.
One victim let me back in the car. I locked myself out.
That he had changed directions from where they wanted to go. It was there that he handcuffed Pesky and locked Lucchesa in the trunk, then knifed and strangled Pesky to demise, subsequently slaying Lucchesa in a similar manner. Kemper later confessed that while handcuffing Pesky, he brushed the back of his hand against one of her breasts, and it embarrassed him, adding that he said, "Whoops, I'm sorry," or something like that, after grazing her breast, despite slaying her minutes later. He also noted that he chose the women because they seemed upper middle class, of a better class of people than the scroungy, messy, dirty, smelly hippie types I wasn't at all interested in. Kemper put both of the women's bodies in the trunk of his Ford Galaxy and returned to his apartment. He was stopped on the way by a police officer for having a broken taillight.
Fighting my inner impulses to not go off on this woman and her 12-year-old son, who's hitchhiking clear back to Seattle.
Society has to loosen up its belt a bit and admit that jailers.
They came up there and gave me a funny look or a fishy eye or quizzical look. I'd have blown their brains out thinking they were coming to get me.
So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this gun out? Already realizing if that gun comes out...
But the officer did not detect the corpses in the car. Kemper's roommate was not at home, so he took the bodies into his apartment, where he photographed and had physical intercourse with the naked corpses before dismembering them. He then put the body parts into plastic bags, which he later abandoned near Loma Petra Mountain. Before disposing of Pesky's and Lucchesa's severed heads in a ravine, Kemper engaged in irumatio with both of them. In August of that year, Pesky's skull was found on Loma Petra Mountain. An extensive search failed to turn up the rest of Pesky's remains or a trace of Lucchesa. Aiko Koo. On the evening of September 14, 1972, Kemper picked up a 15-year-old dance student named Aiko Koo, who had decided to hitchhike to a dance class after missing her bus. He again drove to a remote area where he pulled a gun on Koo before accidentally locking himself out of his car. However, Koo let him back inside, despite the fact that the gun was still in the car. Back inside the car, he proceeded to choke her unconscious, physically attack her, and slay her. Kemper subsequently packed Koo's body into the trunk of his car.
If my little sister told her she needed a mental hospital or a dry-out program, peeled our skin for us.
So we set up this little scenario, and she's busily acting like she's writing, and I'm talking about all of this harebrained.
The state has made me much more credible as a human being.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there.
Yes.
Those bureaucrats took me away from her. And in 5.5 years of filter farbing around, they hand me back, and now I'm an old...
And went to a nearby bar to have a few drinks, then returned to his apartment. He later confessed that after exiting the bar, he opened the trunk of his car, admiring his catch like a fisherman. Back at his apartment, he had physical intercourse with the corpse, then dismembered and disposed of the remains in a similar manner as his previous two victims. Ku's mother called the police to report the disappearance of her daughter and put up hundreds of flyers asking for information, but she did not receive any responses regarding her daughter's location or status. Cindy Schall. On January 7, 1973, Kemper, who had moved back in with his mother, was driving around the Cabrillo College campus when he picked up an 18-year-old student, Cynthia Ann Cindy Schall. He drove to a wooded area and fatally shot her with a .22 caliber pistol. He then placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove to his mother's house, where he kept her body hidden in a closet in his room overnight. When his mother left for work the next morning, he had physical intercourse with and removed the bullet from Schall's corpse, then dismembered and decapitated her in his mother's bathtub. Kemper kept Schall's severed head for several days, regularly engaging in irrumatio with it.
And here's these two probably high school girls. They looked up to be 17 or 18 years old.
100 years ago in the Old West, where someone would set up a boarding house and people who came by never left.
I'm an American, and I went off the deep end.
I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds.
Then buried it in his mother's garden facing upward toward her bedroom. After his arrest, he stated that he did this because his mother always wanted people to look up to her. He discarded the rest of Schall's remains by throwing them off a cliff. Over the course of the following few weeks, all except Schall's head and right hand were discovered and pieced together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle. A pathologist determined that Schall had been cut into pieces with a power saw. Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Liu. On February 5, 1973, after a heated argument with his mother, Kemper left his house in search of possible victims. With heightened suspicion of a serial slayer preying on hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area, students had been advised to accept rides only from cars with university stickers on them.
Like the last two victims, I was so pissed I'd have killed anybody that got in a car.
What were you convicted of?
8 counts of first-degree murder.
My first date was an absolute disaster. Wasn't her fault.
It exceeds the criterion of picking someone up and not getting caught. No one knows me in the county, no one...
Kemper was able to obtain a sticker as his mother worked at UCSC. He encountered 23-year-old Rosalind Heather Thorpe and 20-year-old Alice Helen Allison Liu on the UCSC campus. According to Kemper, Thorpe entered his car first, reassuring Liu to also enter. He first fatally shot Thorpe and then Liu with his pistol and wrapped their bodies in blankets. Kemper again brought his victims back to his mother's house. This time he beheaded them in his car and carried the headless corpses into his mother's house to have physical intercourse with them.
My little sister, was cheating on her husband when my mother was murdered.
What do you think society should do in generally with serial killers?
He then dismembered the bodies, removed the bullets to prevent identification, and discarded their remains the next morning. Some remains were found at Eden Canyon a week later, and more were found near Route 1 in March. When questioned in an interview as to why he decapitated his victims, he explained, "The head trip fantasies were a bit like a trophy. You know, the head is where everything is at."
And a few months later, in the middle of the trial, I smashed the pen on the floor with my boot, sharpened it, got a...
The only time people got killed was when she and I was fighting like cats and dogs, and I couldn't deal with it.
I talked to her just briefly. She was hovering around. I was at the jury room to the courthouse.
She went into that job sober. She came out of the job damn near canned because she went to work drunk one day.
The brain, eyes, mouth, that's the person. I remember being told as a kid, you cut off the head and the body dies. The body is nothing after the head is cut off. Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot left in the girl's body without the head. Clarnell Kemper Strandberg and Sally Hallett. On April 20, 1973, Kemper's mother, Clarnell Strandberg, was awakened by him coming home from a party. While sitting in her bed reading a book, she noticed Kemper enter her room and said to him, "I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Kemper replied, "No, good night." He waited for her to fall asleep, then he snuck back into her room to bludgeon her with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a penknife. Kemper then beheaded her and humiliated her corpse, as stated in a 1984 interview. Kemper stated that he put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for an hour, threw darts at it,
Raped, and I should have been mutilated, and I should have been screwed over and been like Charlie Manson.
And knowing some of those characters and watching how easy it was for me to stumble into what I did.
And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me.
I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up.
and ultimately smashed her face in. He also cut out her tongue and larynx and put them in the garbage disposal. However, the garbage disposal could not break down the tough vocal cords and ejected the tissue back into the sink. That seemed appropriate, as much as she'd bitched and screamed and yelled at me over the many years, Kemper later said. Kemper hid his mother's corpse in a closet and went to drink at a nearby bar. Upon his return, he invited his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sarah Taylor Sally Hallett, over to the house to have dinner and watch a movie. When Hallett arrived, Kemper strangled her to demise to create a cover story that his mother and Hallett had gone away together on vacation. He subsequently put Hallett's corpse in a closet, obscured any outward signs of a disturbance.
We are taking your son away because you must be an unfit mother. He's a murderer. He killed people.
Recalcitrant troublemaker inmates, take them out back and kill them and bury them.
Term of 7 to life, which at that time was the maximum non-death penalty.
She was a haughty young lady. She's kind of stuck up, distant.
And left a note to the police. It read, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday, no need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible slaying butcher. It was quick, asleep the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do. Afterward, Kemper fled the scene. He drove nonstop to Pueblo, Colorado, taking caffeine pills to stay awake for the over 1,000-mile journey. He had 3 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in his car, and he believed he was the target of an active manhunt. After not hearing any news on the radio about the slayings of his mother and Hallett when he arrived in Pueblo, he found a phone booth and called the police.
Consecutive would be 1 at a time, and of course you can't serve multiple life sentences, but
I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother.
the only interview I did back at the time of my case. This is just a little anecdote for you here.
He confessed to the slayings of his mother and Hallett, but the police did not take his call seriously and told him to call back at a later time. Several hours later, Kemper called again, asking to speak to an officer he personally knew. He confessed to that officer of slaying his mother and Hallett, then waited for the police to arrive and take him into custody. Upon his capture, Kemper also confessed to the slayings of the 6 students. When asked in a later interview why he turned himself in, Kemper said the original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just a pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Toward the end there, I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing, and at the point of near exhaustion, near collapse, I just said to hell with it and called it all off. Trial. Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree slaying on May 7, 1973. He was assigned the Chief Public Defender of Santa Cruz County, Attorney Jim Jackson. Due to Kemper's explicit and detailed confession, his counsel's only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges. Kemper twice tried to commit self-hurt in custody. His trial went ahead on October 23, 1973. 3 court-appointed psychiatrists found Kemper to be legally sane.
After 2 weeks, I couldn't handle the reality of those pictures. Now, I've read where guys have hung criminals.
Because there was television available there, I had a canteen, I had some food items in my house.
It started coming to a head again, so I went back down. I ran away back down there.
And then 5 minutes later, I'd put that away, and there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd put it away.
One of the psychiatrists, Dr. Joel Fort, investigated his juvenile records and the diagnosis that he was once psychotic. Fort also interviewed Kemper, including under truth serum, and relayed to the court that Kemper had engaged in cannibalism, alleging that he sliced flesh from the legs of his victims, then cooked and consumed these strips of flesh in a casserole. Nevertheless, Fort determined that Kemper was fully cognizant in each case, and stated that Kemper enjoyed the prospect of the infamy associated with being labeled a slayer. Kemper later recanted the confession of cannibalism. California used the McNaughton standard, which held that for a defendant to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it must be clearly proved that at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of reason, from disease of mind, and not to know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know he was doing what was wrong. Kemper appeared to have known that the nature of his acts was wrong.
All of a sudden, somebody shows up out of nowhere. I pick them up, take them where they're going, but I didn't do nothing to them.
And brought this pen back in. I smuggled it in with me. And I get strip shook leaving the cell.
And he had shown signs of malice aforethought. On November 1, Kemper took the stand. He testified that he slayed the victims because he wanted them for myself like possessions, and attempted to convince the jury that he was insane, based on the reasoning that his actions could have been committed only by someone with an aberrant mind. He stated that two beings inhabited his body, and that when the Slayer personality took over, it was kind of like blacking out. On November 8, 1973, the 6-man, 6-woman jury deliberated for 5 hours before declaring Kemper sane and guilty on all counts. He asked for the demise penalty, requesting demise by torture.
Took his skull and made an inkwell out of it with gold hinges on it for the pens. This was some notorious criminal, right? I said, gee, that's kind of...
Flywheel loose and just fall apart. I say, wow, this is insane.
My gun was under the seat. What in the hell am I doing telling you that?
Because those immediately about me were very much set on destructive attitudes toward me, so I...
However, with a moratorium placed on capital punishment by the Supreme Court of California, he instead received 7 years to life for each count, with these terms to be served concurrently, and was sentenced to the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Psychology. While on trial for slaying his grandparents, Kemper was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by court-appointed psychiatrists. However, California Youth Authority psychiatrists and social workers at Atascadero State Hospital disagreed on the basis that Kemper showed no flight of ideas, no interference with thought, no expression of delusions or hallucinations,
like in the Old West, and tanned the guy's hide and made a pair of shoes out of it. The doctor did, the city doctor.
And I took it back to my high-security jail cell up in Redwood City. I was really slammed down tight.
And no evidence of bizarre thinking. They further observed him to be highly intelligent and introspective. Kemper was therefore re-diagnosed with personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. Shortly after arriving at California Medical Facility in 1973, Kemper was admitted to psychiatrists for re-evaluation. He was re-diagnosed with antisocial, narcissistic, and schizotypal personality disorders. Imprisonment. In the California Medical Facility, Kemper was incarcerated in the same prison block as other notorious criminals, such as Herbert Mullen and Charles Manson. Kemper showed particular disdain for Mullen, who committed his slayings at the same time and in the same area as Kemper. He described Mullen as just a cold-blooded slayer, slaying everybody he saw for no good reason. Kemper manipulated and physically intimidated Mullen, who, at 5 feet 9 inches, was a foot shorter than him.
Rituals that I felt I had to go through to protect myself. I was like, again, it's embarrassing. I was a youngster.
Sexual or grabbing at her. And I was just such a dork, taking her to a John Wayne movie and...
You were able to appear like an ordinary person, non-threatening to...
When I first came to prison, I had much the same attitude. It was a very defensive attitude.
Kemper stated that Herbie had a habit of singing and bothering people when somebody tried to watch TV, so I threw water on him to shut him up. Then, when he was a good boy, I'd give him peanuts. Herbie liked peanuts. That was effective because pretty soon he asked permission to sing. That's called behavior modification treatment. Kemper remains among the general population in prison and is considered a model prisoner. He was in charge of scheduling other inmates' appointments with psychiatrists and was an accomplished craftsman of ceramic cups. He was also a prolific narrator of audiobooks for a charity program that prepared material for the visually impaired. A 1987 Los Angeles Times article stated that he was the coordinator of the prison's program and had personally spent over 5,000 hours narrating books, with several hundred completed recordings to his name.
I must have been a terrible accuser to her, a terrible accusal of what a rotten mother she was.
I do about a 45-degree angle when I get to the end. And I pull the string and it lights up this end.
They never even knew what was going on. I let them out. I would have gotten away with those two being murdered.
say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess.
Kemper was retired from these positions in 2015 after he experienced a stroke and was declared medically disabled. He received his first rules violation report in 2016 for failing to provide a urine sample. While imprisoned, Kemper had participated in a number of interviews, including a segment in the 1982 documentary The Slaying of America, as well as an appearance in the 1984 documentary No Apparent Motive. His interviews have contributed to the understanding of the mind of serial slayers. FBI profiler John Douglas described Kemper as among the brightest prison inmates he interviewed and capable of rare insight for a violent criminal. He further added that he personally liked Kemper, referring to him as friendly, open, sensitive, and having a good sense of humor. Kemper is forthcoming about the nature of his crimes and has stated that he participated in the interviews to save others like himself from slaying. At the end of his No Apparent Motive interview, he said, "There's somebody out there that is watching this and hasn't done that, hasn't slayed people and wants to, and rages inside and struggles with that feeling, or is so sure they have it under control. They need to talk to somebody about it. Trust somebody enough to sit down and talk about something that isn't a crime. Thinking that way isn't a crime. Doing it isn't just a crime."
I had to do a whole interview over once because the lady wouldn't check her audio tape recorder.
But I'm saying, wow, it's uncanny. It was almost like it was meant to be that way, and I said, wow.
And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on.
It amplified everything I was feeling. It got me really drove, and for 2 days after that, they were trying to scrape me off the ceiling.
It's a horrible thing. It doesn't know when to quit, and it can't be stopped easily once it starts. He also conducted an interview with French writer Stéphane Bourgoin in 1991. Kemper was first eligible for parole in 1979. He was denied parole that year, as well as at parole hearings in 1980, 81, and 82. He subsequently waived his right to a hearing in 1985. He was denied parole at his 1988 hearing, where he said, "Society is not ready in any shape or form for me. I can't fault them for that." He was denied parole again in 1991 and in 1994. He then waived his right to a hearing in 1997 and 2002.
A week later, I murdered my mother. Went back to Santa Cruz and killed her.
I started to run, and I tripped over the gun that I'd had in my pants that I had totally forgotten was there.
He attended the next hearing in 2007, where he was again denied parole. Prosecutor Ariadne Simon said, "We don't care how much of a model prisoner he is because of the enormity of his crimes." Kemper waived his right to a hearing again in 2012. He was denied parole in 2017 and is next eligible in 2024. In popular culture, Kemper has influenced many works of film and literature. He and fellow serial slayers Ted Bundy, Gary Heidnik, Jerry Brudos, Gary Ridgway, and Ed Gein were used as inspiration for the character of Buffalo Bill in Thomas Harris's 1988 novel The Silence of the Lambs. Like Kemper, Bill fatally shoots his grandparents as a teenager. Dean Koontz cited Kemper as an inspiration for Edgar Vess, the villain of his 1996 novel Intensity. The character Patrick Bateman in the 2000 film American Psycho mistakenly attributes a quote by Kemper to Gein, saying, "You know what Ed Gein said about women? He said, 'When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to take her out.'"
I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun.
My officer, or my lawyer, does not want me talking to the media at all, so.
A failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure.
Talk to her, be real nice and sweet, and treat her right. The other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick. A direct-to-video horror film loosely based on Kemper slayings, titled Kemper the Co-Ed Slayer, was released in 2008. In 2012, French author Marc Duguay published a novel, Avenue des Géants, about Kemper. Kemper was portrayed by 6'5" actor Cameron Britton in 3 episodes.
And I went to a strip cell 2 cells down, where all I had was a mattress over a hole in the floor.
As I'm sitting there with a severed head in my hand, talking to it.
Incredible energies, positive and negative.
So if they have a camera on me 24 hours a day, a monitor, videotape monitor.
Number 2, 3, and 10 of the first season of the 2017 Netflix television drama series Mindhunter. Britton received a nomination for the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series for this role. Kemper has been the subject of multiple books, including Edmund Kemper, The True Story of the Co-Ed Slayer, and The Co-Ed Slayer, a study of the slayings, mutilations, and matricide of Edmund Kemper III, among others. Extracts from Kemper's interviews have been used in numerous songs, including Love-Hate by Dystopia, Abomination Unseen by Devourment, Forever by The Berserker.
"Oh, gee, you don't mind me." You know, she kind of got hung up on my looks or whatever. You know, I mean, she's a gorgeous young lady.
Pick up the corner of the carpet, I pull out these pictures in an envelope, and I say, "Geez, I don't believe this. Now I gotta believe it."
So I turned that light on, I opened the door, I closed the door, because my mother complains of the cold coming in from the basement.
And if it had been in a city, I would have been a mass murderer at age 15.
Severed Head by Commando, New Flesh by Pitch Shifter, and Crave by Optimum Wound Profile. He is discussed in many songs, such as Edmund Kemper Had a Horrible Temper by Macabre, Fortress by System of a Down, Temper Temper Mr. Kemper by the Celibate Rifles, Slaying by Seabound, Ed Kemper by Church of Misery, Edmund Temper by Amigo the Devil, and Edmund Kemper by Skind. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.